Welcome, and thank you for checking in at the Inner Game of Change podcast, where I focus on exploring the multi-layers of managing organizational change. My guests cover a diverse number of critical topics to enable effective and sustainable change in the workplace. My name is Ali Jama, and you're listening to the Inner Game of Change podcast. My guest today is Melanie Franklin, an international change consultant and a co-chair of the UK Change Management Institute, a respected international author of textbooks and articles on change, and founder of the Continuous Change community. Melanie is a wealth of knowledge and has led transformational change practice for over 20 years. I'm grateful to have Melanie sharing her thoughts and knowledge with me today. Well, Melanie, thank you so much for joining the Inner Game of Change podcast. I am grateful for your time.
Thank you. It's early in the morning here, but we'll keep going.
Yeah, and you're in Spain right now, aren't you?
I am. So we've just done the daylight saving, so it is a little bit darker here in the mornings, but I'm looking out of the sunlight glinting over the mountains, so it's not a bad way to start the day.
Fantastic. Look, Melanie, I'm a big fan of yours. I listened to quite a few speeches for you in different forums, and you're very generous with your time and sharing your knowledge. I know that you've recently published a new edition of your book, The Agile Change Management, which I'm going to have you back early December to discuss that in particular. But today, we're going to talk about the modern change manager as a practice and as a professional. But before we go deeper into the topic, do you want to introduce yourself to my audience, please?
I've been working in project, program and change management for 30 years. I headed up a global team for several global organizations in project and program management. So we were always delivering. And I got very interested in the fact of how we were going to bed down the benefits. So how did we get people to adopt what we had created? Because that to me seemed like the missing link. And I think about 15 years ago, that led me into the change management profession. And since then, I oversee change initiatives by organizations. I'm currently working on a couple of big cultural transformations, both of which actually are about the organization itself becoming more agile. And I'm using everything from agile change to help them get there. I'm also doing some very common change initiatives, things like rolling out new enterprise-wide HR and finance and inventory systems. I'm dealing with new changes in distribution systems, the digital transformation, particularly online to offline, and how retailers are trying to get our purchases online, but then move us into their offline retail spaces to do even more shopping. So I do this for a living. Everything that I do is rooted in practicality, because I'm as interested in the answers as everybody else, because change is constantly challenging. We try to persuade people to work differently. That means giving up their old routines, their old habits, and adopting something new that they haven't done before, that they might make mistakes, they might look a bit stupid to start with, their productivity might be a bit lower, and all of those reasons make you think, no, I'll stay where I am, thanks. I'll carry on doing what I've always done. So we're at the sharp end of trying to get people to adopt new ways of working all of the time. And there's no easy answer. It's psychological, it's emotional, everybody's different. And I find it so inspiring that my job really is influencing, motivating, gaining momentum for something new and different. And it's constantly changing itself. So I'm never bored.
And I agree with that. I am never bored too. So I assume that you've got a philosophy about change management, Melanie.
Well, I think the first thing is that you asked me about change managers, and it gets me thinking, oh, that's an interesting one. I think it's much more of a set of responsibilities and a set of attitudes rather than it being a specific role. There are definitely jobs in change management. Last night, I was with a group of 40 people, all of whom have the title Head of Change Management. So they are definitely heading up a practice within their organizations. But a huge number of those people are heading up very small teams of change management professionals. The rest of the people who are actually managing change, of course, the vast majority already have day jobs. If I'm rolling out a new HR system, the people that are managing that change, leading that change on the ground, are the HR professionals. So I've got the heads of the HR business partners in various different parts of the business who are effectively my network of change agents. And it's interesting because actually they wouldn't necessarily see the word change in their job title. They certainly don't see it in their role description. But of course, that's their skill. So I think we've got a whole group that comes from the business, a vast majority of people who actually don't really know that much about change, but they're doing it naturally.
They do it, yeah.
And we've got a whole other group, which, again, I'm really interested in, which is on the project and program management side. My very strong belief is that project and program management delivers the tangible change. It absolutely is part of the change journey, because a project will deliver outputs that we're going to use, something new and different. It can be new equipment, new platforms, new apps. But it equally could be that the project is to do a restructuring and to slot people into different parts of the organization. Or with a team of business analysts, maybe it's a new set of processes. But whatever that tangible piece is, there is the whole embedding that and it becoming new ways of working. You might be lucky and get a formal change management role as part of your project team, or be working alongside a change management professional. But I passionately believe that your project will go better if you understand what are all the steps on the cycle of behavioural change, because it will enrich your own project plan. You're looking ahead because, after all, there's the tangible change. The behavioural change piece is the secret sauce.
Yes.
It's the bit that actually gets us to benefits. So why wouldn't you want to know about it?
Yes. Yeah. So you talked about set of attitudes. What are the key attitudes of an effective change practitioner? Because I'll share with you one. We were having a discussion the other day, because our attitudes are reflections of our personalities. And sometimes we come to the table thinking that change is hard, and therefore, if we come with this set of attitude, then that's going to be reflected in the plans that we're going to design for the business. And vice versa, if I am a believer that change is good by nature, challenging by implementation, then that can be reflected in my plan as well. What's your take on it?
Well, I think a lot of people who work in change management are the early adopters. They are definitely of the mind that change is natural, change is good, change is positive. I come to the table believing that change is absolutely necessary. It's a positive force for good. But I do come to the table believing that change is difficult for some. So I plan for the worst case scenario. And I build in lots of activities where we will be nudging people towards that realization that trying something new is the way to go forward. Yeah. So I always plan for the worst, and I'm very happy when I experience people who think, this is no problem, I'm just going to do something different now. Yeah. But I do think that our change plans need to cater for everybody, and they need to be rich enough to understand that some people will need a lot more nudging. So I think there's a lot of activities in there which are repeated. There are more conversations. There are more discussions. There is opportunities to allow some people to vent their anger because they feel they're being sent off course by a change. Not everybody needs that. But if you haven't prepared for that to begin with, then you won't have that ready. And you'll only be talking to a proportion of people who think, this is no problem. And I do believe that that's a relatively small proportion of people.
I agree. You talked about the richness Richness comes from, a variety of things: competencies, attitudes, confidence, communication skills. But there's a key component, which is a qualification in the change management practice. How integral is that? Is that a deal breaker?
I absolutely don't think that qualifications should ever be a deal breaker.
Sure.
But I am passionate about them because of two things. I think they give us two really important things. Number one, when we're dealing with people who we are trying to persuade them to take a risk and do something different, they need to know that we're a credible force. And qualifications are a shortcut to advertising that credibility. And it's not important with lots of people, but there will be some stakeholders you come up against where actually being able to demonstrate, they might look you up on LinkedIn, for example, but you can demonstrate that actually I have got credibility. I'm a professional in this area, yeah. I think is incredibly helpful. But I think for that vast majority I talked about who are in the business, who are leading themselves and others through change, I think qualifications give you something else, which is confidence. Because if you've done some studying in the background, there is a little ticker in your head that goes, I've got this. I know this. Yep. And that inner confidence, I think, gives you perhaps a little bit of resilience to deal with some of the more difficult pushback when people are actually struggling with the change.
Yes. It gives you resilience, and also that resilience is underpinned by competency. What's your take on the people that, I always look at it in two groups. There is the purist group that only wants to apply to the letter, the methodology that they use, whatever that is. Or there are people that have a mix of things. So they look at it as a toolkit, and because no two situations will be the same, and therefore you'll have to look at a myriad of, approaches. You don't need to be qualified in all of them. But certainly you need to be aware of all the other tools that are actually available. Would you agree with that?
Well, I think it's very interesting that in change, because it's such a broad profession, I encounter a lot less of the methodological, there is one way to do it. I think those that understand change recognise that we need actually an incredibly broad toolkit because every human is different. We have lots of similarities, but there are lots of differences too. And we need to be able to persuade, to motivate using lots of different ideas. So I think it's that piece around we need competency, absolutely. But what inspires me about my career is that I think to be effective in change management, we are the personification of the Carol Dweck's growth mindset. Yeah. We have to keep growing. I mean, one of the reasons for talking to you and giving up my morning is because I find that these conversations help me have moments of discovery. Likewise, and afterwards, I'll sit down and scribble a few notes and think, oh, that's interesting. I want to do some more thinking about that. And that's what I love about our profession, is that it is continually developing. I still attend lectures. I go to approximately 10 lectures a year in neuroscience and positive psychology. I read probably about 30 textbooks a year. Although I've just published the second edition of mine, that doesn't stop me reading lots of other people's work. I also facilitate the continuous change community, where every month we have a networking and debating conversation for 90 minutes. And I always learn something from that. So I think that if you want to be in change management, whether it's a formal role for you or it's part of your leadership development, I think there's something in there about curiosity. Yes. That you actually you're very open to new ideas and new ways of doing things.
Yes, fantastic. As you would know, in the profession, there are a lot of companies and organizations that utilize the skills of a change practitioner as an external contractor for a limited period of time. And that comes with its own challenges for the contractor, because you've got a limited period of time and you need to get a lot of stuff done, versus there are change managers who are already embedded within the business. What are your thoughts around the type of challenges each type faces?
Well, I think if you're an external, one of the advantages you bring to the table is you would have been leading change in lots of different organizations.
So that's experience.
You've got a wide range of experience, and you've seen a lot, and you've probably got a big range of ideas and tools and that can address things. But you come with a disadvantage that you don't have the close, trusted relationships within the organization that you're now serving.
And the local knowledge.
Yeah, you don't have that local knowledge, and therefore your ability to be empathetic and to walk in the shoes of those that you're now working with, I think, goes to the top of your skill set. Whereas if you are one of that vast majority of people within the organization who are trying to make change happen, you've already got a network of relationships that you can develop. And in fact, those are the people that I will want to work with most closely to help me build out a network of sort of change agents. However,
hi there. Thank you for listening to this podcast. For more podcasts, check us out at theinnergameofchange.com.au.
if you're within the organization, it is sometimes hard to make the case for change because you are caught up in the comfort of how things are currently done. So you don't have that external comparison to call on that gives you that sort of sense of urgency. You can't see that others have sort of gone ahead and that other organizations are far better at certain things than your own organization. You don't have that sort of evidence, I think, which makes it harder to stay motivated. And also, if you are involved in some of the more difficult changes around restructuring, it means that you're at the sharp end of perhaps impacting the career path of your own colleagues, perhaps in some cases making them redundant. I think that's always a very difficult one. Edgar Schein said it best when he talked about the need to have external contractors working hand in glove with those internal to the organization, because his point was that external contractors can see the assumptions that have been made, can see the patterns of behavior because they've almost got that helicopter view.
Yes.
Whereas those within the organization have that understanding at the detailed level of the tweaks and changes we can make to get to where we want to go. And I think if we put the two together, it's a very successful force.
I also find that especially in my situation, I've been in contract business for a number of years now. I get a seat at the table with the sponsors faster than an internal person. And whilst I was an internal person at some stage and nobody gave me a seat at the table, but I always respect that. And I come with, I sit at the table with full responsibility, understanding what the sponsor would like to achieve, sharing my thoughts, but at the same time acknowledging that I need to share everything with the internal partners as well. Because we are absolutely
a conduit.
Yeah, because we are driven by one purpose, and the outcome we want to get is that change experience. So totally agree with you in that regards. Let's talk about the skills and complementary skills for a change manager. Actually, I had a conversation today with a change manager, and I asked, how much do you need to know as a change manager or practitioner about project management as a field itself? I don't expect you to be qualified in it, although that might be an advantage. But at least you need to know the framework, the particulars, and how a project manager wants to lead the project versus how you would like to lead the project from the people side of things. So do we need to know something about the project management or agile project management?
I think because the project management is a very special relationship for us in change management, because, as I've said, I think projects create the tangible change that we are then trying to embed. So there's the natural relationship. And certainly as with any empathetic relationship, the more we can understand, the more we can walk in the shoes of our project colleagues, the easier it is to build that relationship. So I think it is for that reason, first of all, that we need to understand. Certainly, I think it's about the plan, the approach they're going to be using. Are they gathering all of the ideas up front and then going to deliver it in one sort of complete solution at the end, a more traditional waterfall approach? Or are they going to be delivering in waves or iterations? Are they using a more agile approach? That would be helpful. And I think that a lot of my work, listening to people around the world, I'm constantly asked for that insight around an agile approach, because I think that there is something about building that relationship. A lot of the project work, and that also extends into organizations that have become more agile. So they're not necessarily calling them project managers now. We have product owners who are delivering. They're still doing the same thing. They're delivering tangible change. They might be organized differently with different roles and responsibilities, but ultimately they deliver tangible change. And being able to understand that world, and being able to marry the fact that in change, we're naturally agile. We do a little bit of change. We see the reaction and the feedback, and then we either build on it or we realize we need to change direction a little bit. So I think we've always been agile in the change world. What I see happening now is that's becoming slightly more formalized in our own change plans, and the relationship that we build with our project colleagues is also becoming a little bit more formalized as we perhaps deliver services to them about, we'll deliver the runway, you build the plane.
Yes.
And I think there is, and we need to know what size of plane, please, and what speed it will land at, to give you the right length of runway.
And what type of passengers.
I think there is yeah, exactly. How many people do you want in this terminal building? So I think there is a symbiotic relationship. So it's always the more you know about those that you work closely with, the easier it is to build that relationship.
Yes.
But I come back to the inspiring nature of change, which is that alongside my understanding of my project colleagues, whenever I take on a new assignment, I have to learn the business that we're actually changing, because people are doing their job day to day. So I have to have a fairly good appreciation. If I'm changing HR, I've got to try to understand what the human resources function does, how it's done in that organization. If I'm changing finance, I need to understand approximately some of the finance roles. But I'm also working in mining. I'm working in luxury goods at the moment. I'm working for a utility company. So what I know about electricity generation, well, I've had to learn quite a lot.
Yes.
Because I need to try to understand. It's all about empathy. Can I walk in the shoes of somebody else? And a very quick way to start that is to show a respect and appreciation for the subject matter expertise that they have. I'm never going to be an expert in their world, of course not. Yeah. But I can at least ask curious, interested questions, and learn a little bit more. So I think that empathetic piece, learn everything, not just one thing.
Empathy through knowledge can be a powerful thing. What other complementary skills do you think a change practitioner would need to think about or explore? Like, you already mentioned the neuroscience, which is really evolving over the last maybe even 5 years. And there's a lot of material out there, even free material on the internet. What other complementary fields that we need to explore?
Well, I think let's start with the most basic skill set of all, which is we all come to the table with an ability to be a change leader, because we experience change in our own lives all of the time.
Of course.
I think for me, what sets aside people who are perhaps talented at change is that they have that ability to look perhaps at an experience that they've had recently and be able to understand that it went through a sort of life cycle, and that they can appreciate their emotions and they can see how they built up their ability to work in that new way, and that they can take that appreciation and perhaps apply it to any situation within an organization that they come across. Because it is, after all, change is about the human condition. It's about how we experience it. So I think that neuroscience, as I said, I go to a lot of lectures in neuroscience. I continue to study, understanding how the brain naturally reacts, and all the little shortcuts that our brains have developed is incredibly helpful in perhaps curating some of my words, some of my decisions about what I put first, what I put next, to really respect perhaps how the brain is most likely going to react. And I partner that with the School of Positive Psychology, because one of the things that is very clear from neuroscience is that the human brain is quick to calculate the negatives, much slower to calculate the positives. But if we can't feel positive about the change, if we don't buy into it, then we won't get on board with it. So my job is to put the positive case for change with everyone that I come into contact with, because I need it's not a simple majority. I need a vast majority of people to get on board with the new way of working if I'm ever to sustain the change. So I think that certainly there are schools of thought, behavioral economics, in part, understanding people's different behaviors. But again, that's driven by neuroscience and the School of Positive Psychology. But I'm looking at that from the lens of, yes, but how do we change behaviors? And I don't think you need to do massive numbers of qualifications in neuroscience to really think through the human experience. I think you have to be open, particularly to considering, how did you react to change when it came up? What was your initial emotional reaction? Look around you. How did other people react? Why did they see the world differently? Then you start to really understand, maybe that's what everyone that I'm working with is going to be going through. There's a whole range of emotions. How do I tailor my activities for those that are naturally enthusiastic, those who are more naturally hesitant? How do I get activities that address people who are very angry about the change, who are completely neutral about the change, and the odd one or two who are naturally enthusiastic about it? Yeah. So I think it's your own experience is a fantastic bedrock. So if you're changing roles into change, you come equipped with a huge amount of understanding. You just have to tap into that first.
And that requires a lot of self-awareness and highest level of change empathy. That's what I call it anyway. We are coming to the end, close to the end of the podcast, and I've got a couple of questions for you, Melanie. What do you think? I do believe that the change practitioner's role has evolved over the last 10 years. Where do you think probably will go to over the next maybe 5 years?
I think that the COVID crisis has had a big impact, because organisations in March and April last year, in whichever country you were in, started to see the writing on the wall and were backing their staff out to work from home. And they made a huge number of changes in how they engage with their staff and with their customers. And for that reason, they look back now on 2020 and go, wow, we made change happen very, very fast. We're really good at this. So I think the landscape of change management has changed, because people think we're really naturally good at this, when they fail to see that particular set of changes was unique in terms of it wasn't just your organization making that change. The sense of urgency came from a global piece, and societal change was the real driving force. But because of that, I think that there is a far less satisfaction with the idea that you might have a central team who sort of tell you how to manage change. I think that push mechanism has broken, and I think we now need to work on the pull mechanism, where we generate the appreciation of the effectiveness of well-managed change. So we get leaders who want to pull our information from us, pull guidance, pull advice. So I think the world has shifted quite dramatically, and this, I'm the change manager, I'm going to tell you how this change is run. I think that naivety is very much in the background.
Yeah, and look, I also think that talking about the COVID environment, the change happened, but we're going to have to assess whether it was effective or not, because there's a lot of consequence and negative consequences that we haven't even seen. And we can't understand probably until another few years down the track. And that's the impact assessment that we think we can manage, but we can only really see just one part of it, the tip of the iceberg when it comes to global challenge like that. Final word from you, Melanie. What's your advice to the change practitioners and the community in general?
2 pieces of advice, and they both relate to growing your knowledge. Just make sure that you keep developing, because I think our profession and our management discipline keeps developing. And I think that the demand, what people expect from us in terms of the level of help we're providing, keeps developing. And I think there's 2 things that you can do. It's all about making connections with other people who are in the world of change, which is why these podcasts are so useful, because it is difficult to be at the sharp end of people's resistance to change, persuading people to do things differently. So networking with other people in this world, I'm constantly doing it because I'm constantly looking for solutions. There are new challenges every day. And one of the best sources of finding the answers I need is to be talking to other people, particularly outside of the change I'm running, because I want that wider grouping of experience and ideas. And I'll go back to my earlier comment as well as networking to find that supportive group of people who are a source of great ideas. Don't forget to undertake training and qualifications, because I think that forces you also into a more structured learning. But again, it does the same thing. It exposes you to new tools, new techniques, new models, new theories, which will spark ideas in your head as well.
Fantastic.
But we are in a profession that's not static. So keep developing. Have that sort of growth mindset as the core to yourself.
Great piece of advice. You run a continuous change management community group. Very briefly, just tell us what that is.
Well, I've set it up in LinkedIn. So it's the Continuous Change Community. Yep. I don't think it's the most exciting name in the world, but it's really interesting that the group chose that name, Continuous Change, because we don't just manage a change in isolation. We are all working within the fact that we're experiencing multiple changes simultaneously. So it is about, how do we take our profession forward? There's a lot of theories and models about how to manage an individual change, but how do we cope in an environment where we're working with people who have got their business as usual role, plus lots of other changes that are happening to them at the same time. Yeah. And we're just another problem on top. So I think there's something in there about what we're trying to do is sort of stretch the answers and learn new things from each other. So it's a LinkedIn group, and we get together once a month and have a good debate about things. Because again, I'm just trying to be an authentic leader.
Yes.
I need to learn new ideas too. And I'm just trying to role model. I can't say to you, join communities, learn more things, if I don't also put the effort into maybe creating a community that gives people that option.
Fantastic. How would people reach you, Melanie?
You can connect with me on LinkedIn really easily. And I'm very open to those connections, and I like a good chat.
Fantastic. And we're going to put all the information about you on the podcast information. I know I'm going to have you back to discuss your book, but Melanie, it's been wonderful having you. I'm really grateful for your time. And until next time, stay well and stay safe.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I hope you enjoyed listening to this episode of the Inner Game of Change podcast. To know more about our guests and this episode, check out the innergameofchange.com.au website. And remember to subscribe. I can't wait to share with you the next episode. Until then, stay well and stay safe.